Want to use this beauty?
They always keep it handy, huh, Pete? He's like a gunfighter with his six-gun, always keeping it close.
Oh, the time will come up when the winds will stop and the breeze will cease to be breathing. Like the stillness in the wind for the hurricane begins. The hour that the ship comes in. And the seas will split and the ship will hit. And the sands on the shoreline will be shaking. And the tide will sound and the wind will pound. And the morning will be breaking.
You play the guitar, but learning the banjo is a totally different animal.
Yeah. I think I'd have been extremely intimidated about the idea of even trying to pull a magic trick off and make it seem like I'm playing at Pete Seeger's level if I had no conversancy with a stringed instrument, you know what I mean? But I have enough technical facility with my left hand to feel not just that I could, but excited about it. Like I think every actor in some part of them wants to be a rock star, you know, and I think that
and that's you too, yes.
And the fantasy of there's a dream. I think every actor holds the dream in some sense. The activation between a performer and an audience that a musician can create, and living inside music, just living inside music is so beautiful and enviable and everything. And so the idea of getting to channel, become the channel of a great musician is, I mean, it's the best invitation. You know, I almost started crying at the idea of it because.
Did you really?
Well, I mean, I was nervous about it because I was nervous about the whole enterprise, because I thought the idea of a biopic about Dylan, if you just said it that way, I was like, ooh, like, I'm not sure.
This is a huge gamble.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not sure, because to me, it was too mystical. That period of Dylan and those people, it has a mythical kind of place in me, and I thought this could be really, really a bad idea.
Go back to that for a second. Why did you almost cry?
Because the idea of marinating in music and getting to play that music, which, you know, even if I wasn't playing Dylan's music, which is like really, really, you know, a deep soundtrack for me, you know, Pete Seeger and his voice and his demeanor, and there's so much to him that to me was fascinating and beautiful and strange and weirdly square, and you know, he's just a fascinating person and a beast of a musician. I've been doing this a long time, and sometimes something gets under your skin and it's just like it almost like activates all of the sensory stimulus. It's just like, this is going to be really stimulating. This is going to be all the best things, you know, hard and tricky, and you get that kind of buzzy feeling of if you slip off this wire, this is going to go bad. You know, this could go badly. And with that, there's a certain sense of responsibility. You know, like you're just aware. I felt aware as soon as Jim called and said, "What do you think about Pete Seeger?" It's just like, it's a whole lot goes through you. You're like, there's going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot of responsibility to capture the essence of someone that people loved, like not were like admired, like revered.
Yeah, did that scare you?
Yeah. I mean, not scare.
Worry?
No, just more. It's just activating. It's just like you go. It's like you just adrenaline, in a good way. You know, focus. It like. And sometimes, for me, to get into the place you really want to get into on this, like, you have to push a lot of noise out of the way. And sometimes the motivation to push the clutter, the mental clutter of life aside and give this kind of work what it needs, it actually becomes harder in some ways as you get older. I think it's easier and easier to, I don't want to say go on cruise control, but like once you say yes, back to yes and no, if you say enthusiastically yes to Pete, then a whole lot. It's like you got to clear the desk.
You have to be all in.
Yeah, and go all the way in.
Going back to the banjo for a second, we did an interview with Steve Martin, and he played the banjo for us. And watching him play the banjo, I mean, it's so complex and it's so fast.
Yeah, I made the joke that after I said yes to Jim, I Googled, is there an AI that can replace my hands with Steve Martin's? Like, like can I get that thing where you put your arms behind your back and Steve Martin puts his hands under my armpits and does the playing for me? Which I'm not saying is not what happened. It might have. It might have. Who knows?
But you did it. I mean, we see you doing it. Come on. Early on, you had some success in theater, but was there a casting director who told you find another profession?
There was, I had one of those, like someone sits you down and says, you should do something else.
Like literally, you should do something else.
Yeah, very, very, very well-known casting director in New York. One of the ones you hoped to get in front of, but that was fine. I mean, it's a funny story, and I ran into her later, and she was awesome. Like I can't even like, turn it into a like, I showed you kind of story, because when I bumped into her later and everything, and said, that was me. It was so warmly and gracefully and hilariously handled that it only made me have affection for her. But look, if you don't run into moments where people lay some fundamental uncertainty around, the path you've chosen, and you can't push through it, then you probably don't belong.
That makes sense, especially in this particular business where people are telling you, that's part of it, is people telling you no.
Of course, yeah,
right?
Of course. I think, now that I have kids, that you really start realizing you really want to imbue in people. It's really hard, but it's like you just don't learn anything if you succeed. Right? You just can't. You can't learn anything if you don't do it badly.
But that's part of the process, is that feeling of can I do this?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll fail.
And also like, this is the one I'm going to get found out.
Do you still feel that way?
This is the one that they are going to realize I am a fraud, and and that only editing has like, But the thing that keeps the whole thing interesting is if you reset yourself into that place every time, then every single time you're going to learn something. And there's not a lot of jobs you can say that.
It's true. Going back to your trajectory, when Fight Club came, I mean, it's huge now. It has a huge fan following. It's acclaimed. But when Fight Club came out, it was not successful financially.
No, not at all. Not at all. And it was polarizing. I would say there were those who absolutely, like, it hit them right in the center of their sense of their own selves, and then there were people who just absolutely thought it was, garbage, panned it. And I've shared this story before, but Brad and I, when we watched it at a certain film festival where it got released, and it got booed. It was booed at the opening screening.
You're sitting there and you're
Brad
hearing the
and I were in the
boos.
far back, and it got booed at the Venice Film Festival. And as the credits rolled, Brad looked at me in the dark, crying, and he said, "That's the best film we'll ever be in." And I said, "Me too," and I think so too. And we were hugging each other and crying because we were so happy with like boos rising around us. You know what I mean? And I think it's funny, this Shangri-La where we're sitting now, Rick Rubin, the great music producer, runs this place now. And Rick has this beautiful book out about creative life right now. And a thing I've read, it's really sticking in my head right now, this thing he's focused on, where he said, you cannot make things with an eye on the audience. You have to make something that you think is beautiful and that you respond to. And if you do that, it'll find its way. I think that's Dylan's artistic truth. And I think in my own way, and I'm not equating myself to any legendary, but a film like Fight Club is a great example. Like we made it for ourselves completely. Like Fincher and Andy Walker and Brad and Helena and me and the whole team on that, I think, was like, we knew what we were chasing, which was something about us and for our friends. You know what I mean? And I don't think any of us had any doubt about whether we'd done what we set out to do. And then it took some time, and not that long, but it took time for the generation of people and now I think a whole nother wave of young people is having that experience. Sometimes you just gotta let your own freak flag fly and see, and people will figure it out or not,
It's a really good point, yeah. And I love what you said about how it's getting the work is the reward, and having these directors, like being able to do Birdman, that's the reward in itself, trying these different things, and that's kind of how you see it as opposed to the other things.
Yeah.
You have this whole life, as you mentioned, outside of acting. You are an environmentalist, you're a tech investor, you are a pilot, you have this whole other life outside of acting. Could you ever see not acting anymore?
Yes, but I'm not sure that I have never felt the need to create a bifurcation. It's not a negative addiction, let's say, so I don't feel that I need to cut it off or cauterize it. I think that a more positive way of engaging with it and actually treating it for the privilege that it is just to allow myself to listen to my own mood, to allow myself to have ebbs and flows of interest, creative inspiration. And if I'm waking up in the morning and my head is on other things, if my aspirations and my ambitions are driving me consciously and unconsciously toward other things, to not feel like not working in films or on stage or anything is dangerous, or not to approach it from a careerist sense. I think that's the main thing. Is it's a trap. If you start looking at it as a career, then you start applying all these external criteria to it, and that's where Pete Seeger really is incredible. Channeling Pete's frequency was such a gift in that sense, because there's never been anybody less interested in attainment. For him, it was all outward, the outward projection of empathy and service. And for me, it's like if you can avoid that headspace where you're looking at it from the outside as an assessed career, then you liberate yourself from so many decisions that aren't about whether you have actual creative motivation and inspiration to pursue something, And I am really lucky. Some of the other things I've done and that I invest my time in and that I work on, I don't need to make movies to make a living. I don't live crazy, and I don't, So I decided for myself a long time ago, I only want to do it when I really feel it, or I'm drawn to any number of dimensions, what it's about, who's working on it, the type of thing it is, and if it means that comes less frequently than it used to, that's fine.
That's actually pretty great.
Yeah. I like the idea that, I can't remember where I read this, but that happiness is best defined as expansion and addiction is narrowing.
So you're happy.
I try not to think about it in those terms. I try to think about whether I feel that at this age in my life, I'm still having an expansive experience of life. It's not always easy. I don't always want it to be easy, but I think widening your frame and having more and more and more experiences and types of people enter it is a higher value than the maximization within a narrow frame, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And I think it's a funny thing going on in life. I think it's particular to American life in some sense, but I feel all around me, and I feel it, to the degree that the industry or, there is this obsession with maximization, I feel like, in our culture, and that can be about money, it can be about career, it can be about fame, but Americans are addicted to the idea of maximal as the highest value or the highest proof point or the highest collateral value, and I examine for myself how I respond to people who are maximizing. I tend to, when I step back, I go, those are some of the narrowest people I've ever met. They're really narrow. And most of the most interesting people, and to me, inspiring people that I've met, who I look at older than me now and look at moving through this, are people who just, the frame kept widening and widening and widening, and you have to be willing to accept trade-offs. You know, there's trade-offs to that, but I think they're positive trade-offs. I'd rather take the dividends of an expansive life as opposed to like the attainment that comes with staying narrow. And I think the really lucky thing about artistic life or creative life is it's not necessarily a mutually exclusive choice. Like, you can expand and still retain the interest in and the willingness to push the clutter aside and go deep with a piece like this one, and then it's really satisfying, and you sort of come out of it and go back on into other things, and it's actually weird. It's like a dream you had.
That's how you feel, yeah?
Totally.
It's like a dream you had.
Totally. The older I get, the more I think that there's this really funny dichotomy, which is people who watch the things, and they might have watched it yesterday. There's lots of young people who are seeing Fight Club for the first time right now. For them, it's extremely tactile and real, and for me, it's already a very ethereal, strange dream. I talked about that with Brad even once. We started saying, God, you have to really reach to remember the experience of actually doing it. And I don't watch it. You know, I don't tend to watch them. So it turns into very much like a dream.
You've had a lot of nice dreams.
Yeah, they're vivid dreams. You know, I don't know if they're always nice, but they're vivid. And it is, I mean, I'm certainly not at the point where I start to say, like, is that actually my memory or memory of a film? I remember Miles Davis saying a thing about how jazz is so great because every single performance of it is a Zen brushstroke, you know, and then it's gone. And that's, when I was working in theater, that's what I loved about it too. Every single night, it's gone. It's just in the ether. But over time, films sort of become like that too. If you've worked on them, they stay fixed for other people, but they turn into sort of a vapor for you. They become indistinct, and sometimes you have to deal with the fact that other people are in a very intense relationship with them, which is cool. You can't hold on to them. You can't hold on to each of them yourself.
That's fascinating. I love that.
Yeah. Dylan had at some point he said, just because you like what I do doesn't mean I owe you anything, which again, I mean, he's rough, you know. I think I really admire. I think it's really true. It's really, really true. It's
a harsh way to put it.
It's a harsh way to put it, but it's really true. I can't not admire how much he wants you to just have a relationship with the work and keep him out of it. It's amazing. That's, to me, the highest state for an artist to sit within, which is, and I'm not saying Dylan has no ego. He's got lots of ways you see his ego from afar, but in many ways, I think he really, to me, he's the ultimate shaman and one of the last of the mystics, you know, like the people who gave us a lot of great stuff without letting us behind the veil so that it could remain mysterious, and who in a lot of ways told us, it's not about me. It's not about me. Just let it soar, let it go into you, and I think that's in many ways it's a much more profoundly healthy way for an artist to think.
You certainly can relate to that.
Yeah, yeah.